Today we're going to talk about Class A foam, and this is being used for more than one course, for wildland, for fire behavior, so it might have some crossover to the two different classes. Be patient with me with that. So we're going to talk about why Class A foam is more efficient than using just water when you have a Class A fire. So let's get going. Of course, water is the most effective fire suppressing agent known to man. It cools, it breaks down that heat side of the fire triangle. It has an amazing power to absorb British thermal units, BTUs of heat. So water is readily available in most places. It's inexpensive, and it's very effective. So that's why firefighters, usually their go-to is water. Now on wildland fires, there is a limited amount of water, so you want to be really wise about the use of your water. But of course, when a hydrant is nearby, you can be more aggressive. So that leads us to kind of talk about water management. When you are fighting fire with water, especially in a wildland setting, you don't want to waste water. Every engine has about 500 gallons. There's usually a water tender assigned to the incident. They've got 4,000 gallons. They're going to be spreading that between the different fire engines fighting the fire. So, sometimes you'll be sitting there for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, waiting for somebody to come and refill you. So you need your firefighters to make every drop count. And you do that by being effective. You hit the base of the fire. Don't be shooting water at the flames. You want to hit it at the base. You also want to use the correct nozzle type, but especially the nozzle stream. So you can see on the bottom right picture, they're using a straight stream, and they're doing that because they're trying to get more distance. Whereas the firefighter on the top is being very aggressive, doing a great job with a reel line there, but he's using a little bit wider stream, and you want to have like a slightly wider stream when you're up close against the fire so that you get more area and you can cool it down more effectively. You want to move fast, but you don't want to move so fast that you don't cool it down, because then you'll burn your hose. So what's the downside of water? Well, water is somewhat viscous, okay? It has a surface tension that causes it to run off of many fuels, and you can kind of test that on yourself. Just drip some water on your clothes, and it'll bead up oftentimes, and slowly will absorb. So that's the thing about water. It's got surface tension. So what do we do about that? Well, we use different kinds of wetting agents and foams and gels. So things like barricade gel, wet water, slippery water. But what's most effective, and nowadays almost every fire engine has a Class A foam tank and an injector, and a little computer pad that'll be on the engineer's panel, where they can automatically just set it to whatever concentration they want, and it will add the foam to the water after the tank, after the pump. You don't want that foam going through the pump. It's hard on the seals, and it will also cause it to cavitate. So you want the foam after the pump, and the injector will squirt it in there at just the right concentrate based on how much water you're flowing and what the pressure is. Now what that will do is it reduces the surface tension, and depending on how you use the foam, and as we talk about this you'll understand it more, you'll see that we either use it to penetrate or to cover, smother, or to separate fuels from the heat or the fire. So Class A foam is the most common wetting agent that we use, and it makes our water 1/3 more effective. So if you had a 300-gallon tank, it's like you got a 400-gallon tank. Most tanks on engines I've driven had a 500-gallon tank, so it's like a 666-gallon tank. It makes it 1/3 more effective. So depending on your percentage is how you're going to use it, and also depending on what kind of nozzles you're using. But if you can use it to penetrate, the fuels will go deeper. The water will go deeper into the fuels, or you can use it to smother the fire and slowly drain into the fuel. And or you can, like in this picture, use it to stick to a surface to protect it from the heat of an approaching fire. So you never want to mix more than 1%. The whole thing about more is better, it just doesn't apply here. 1% concentrate is your maximum, and that's when you're going for a drier, fuller foam. So the formula that you need to know is when you add concentrate to water, you get a foam solution. That foam solution is going to look like milky water. So foam solution is usually, we're going to inject about 0.01 to 0.02, and it's going to allow the water to penetrate deeper into the fuel and be more effective. So the foam solution is considered at best low expansion foam, depending on the nozzles you're using. A lot of nozzles, they entrail a little bit of air into it and will make it a little bit of frothy, but for the most part, like I said before, foam solution looks like milky water. Now the formula for foam solution, as I said, is Class A concentrate plus water. Now if you want foam, you take foam solution and add air, and that's going to give you bubbles, and you get foam. So a fluffier foam is used for a blanketing effect, like in this picture, denying the fire oxygen and also separating the fuels from the fire or from the heat. And also you get a delayed effect where it's going to drain slowly into the fuel. So there are a lot of different ways you can add air. You can do it with nozzles that can give you medium expansion foam, where it's thicker, more bubbles, more air. But you can't really get true dry shaving cream looking foam unless you use a compressor. So CAF systems or compressed air foam systems are used to get high expansion foam, and that foam is so thick and sticky it will stick to the underside of eaves, and I've got a picture of that later on. Class A foam, when mixed with water and air, creates these bubbles, and it has a lower density than water. Now, you need to remember, so what is most effective is the cooling factor. So if I give it too much air, I've got less water. If I give it too much concentrate, I've got less water. So I'm not going to be as effective in cooling when I do that. So you want to use the right proportion, the right nozzle for the right situation. So getting back to foam, as air is mixed in with the water and foam solution, you get this wet, bubbly foam, and or with CAF, a dry shaving cream foam. So that can, and that's kind of what you see in this photograph to the right. Now this firefighter is creating what we call a wet line on a wildland fire. And they'll use that wet line as a buffer to burn out in the one side or the other and keep the fire from going back on to the other side. So it's a wet line. A wet line is never a complete line in wildland firefighting, but it's used in situations like this to either burn out from there or to slow or impede the fire. So these layers of bubbles help to provide a barrier to oxygen, and they insulate fuels from heat. So they're very effective in that sense. So to kind of wrap up the terminology and to understand how it works, solution is a clear, milky fluid. It lacks bubble structure. It's mostly water. Its uses are fire attack and mop-up. It's really good at penetrating deep into fuels like hay bales, compost fires, garbage, big. I went to a fire when I was a brand new firefighter. It was big trash heaps at a facility where they used garbage. They'd burn it off and they'd turn it into energy. And it was stacked like 3 stories high. They used dozers to spread it out, but we didn't have Class A foam, so we just kept dumping water on it. Whereas if we had Class A foam, it really would have helped us get the job done faster. Wet foam is a watery, large to small bubbles, and it's low expansion. You use it just with regular nozzles. Now, if you want to get medium expansion, a more fluid foam, which is similar to watery shaving cream, you need to use special nozzles, and we'll talk about those in a second. Now, this level of foam flows easily, has a moderate drain time, and it can be used in fire attack, but it also has a prolonged effect. It can be used a little bit like the calf system foam, but it won't stick as well. So it can be used for creating a wet line, but not as effectively if you have calf. If you really want to be able to stick it on buildings or to have a really thick, dry shaving cream-like foam for a wet line, then you have to use a calf system. So it'll cling to vertical surfaces. It'll have a very slow drain time. It requires that calf, the compressed air, to be injected into the foam solution. But now remember, you don't have as much water, so it's not good for fire attack. It's good for structure protection. So let's talk about those nozzles. Now, conventional nozzles, of course, can be used with Class A foam, especially if it's just foam solution. But if it, a lot of these nozzles, they do add a little bit of air to it. You can use it in a straight stream, a spray, or a fog setting. Now, if you want to move to a medium expansion foam or a wet fluid kind of foam, you're going to have to use special nozzles. So now, just to finish up on the regular nozzles, if you're using foam solution, whatever, 0.1 to 0.3 maximum, usually 0.2 % of concentrate to water. So foam applied with these nozzles, it's going to enhance wetting, penetration, water spread, but it will not produce a foam structure. To be able to really get a foam structure, we have to use air aspirating nozzles. So aspirating nozzles will inject air into a fine stream of foam solution at the nozzle tip. So they produce a lighter, fluffier bubble, not truly like calf where it's dry, it's still kind of wet. They have larger bubbles that will only travel a short distance. I'll show you the nozzles. You can use them to shoot on top of buildings, but there's different nozzles that will shoot different distances, give different gallons per minute, and I'll show you those in the next slide. The bubble size can vary based on the foam solution mix ratio and the amount of air. So the aspirating nozzles can produce foam using anywhere from 0.2 all the way up to 1 percent solution if you really want it foamy. The ratio, it's going to be varied depending on your application, your fuels, your fire behavior. So then here's these nozzles. Now they have, now down on the base, near the base, they've got little holes in it, and it used like a Venturi effect, and it entrails air into the foam solution to give you this more, bubbly kind of product that you want in certain situations. So they give you that medium expansion by using a Venturi effect of drawing air into the foam through those little holes. It's going to be more air, though, thicker foam. So not always used for fire attack, can be in certain situations, but usually more for fire protection, structure protection, a wet line, and things of that nature. We used it a lot for, what would I call it? It would be like a mop-up on a car fire or on a garbage heap fire. I'd say, hey, let's just dump a ton of foam on it, and even when we're gone, it's going to continue to penetrate and cool this down. So these various sizes and configurations are all going to have different ratios, allowing for thicker foam, but not necessarily a good pressure or PSI, or a thinner, but maybe a better stream by having a thinner, not as much air. So here's a great example. These are the kind of nozzles that we used to carry on LA County Fire. And this one is used here in this picture, and you can see it doesn't throw very far, but it has a very nice, thick, wet, but frothy foam. So it's good for mop-up if you're kind of about to leave. I would use a foam solution for the mop-up, but then right before we'd leave, we might cover it with this. Or you could use it like the other applications I've already mentioned, to put it on something you're trying to protect, or to be a wet line to burn out from. Now these guys over here, they have a longer throw, like this one. And as you add more pressure, and it doesn't put as much air into it, it does allow it to project onto the roof, under the eaves, and you can use it to do a really pretty good job of structure protection. Not as good as calf. So this next picture shows us a great example of calf being used for structure protection in a wildland fire. And notice that it's even sticking under the eaves. And the only way you're going to get that thick of a foam, that it looks like it's just covered in shaving cream, right? The only way you're going to get that is with calf. It forces the air in. It injects air in. So there's more air, more bubbles, frothier and drier. Now, again, downside, not as wet, so therefore not as cooling of a factor. But when you do this, you're actually protecting this building from heat. And it'll have a hang time, sometimes as much as a whole day. So you can do it before the fire gets there and do multiple houses, and hopefully it'll stick and stay. And they use this a lot in national parks and things like that. In the Yellowstone fire, they saved a lot of iconic buildings using Class A foam. So they're usually mounted on the engine, and they are high maintenance, though, and it does create problems. So some fire departments are moving away from calf because of the costs. You're going to get a high quality foam, very dry, and you want to use at least a 0.3% or more to get this good of a frothy foam. Now, if you're not in a wildland class, you could probably cut it off right there, because the last two frames have to do with the last two slides with wildland. When we're talking about a wet line that we might use, from which we'll do either a firing out operation with an indirect attack, we want to make sure that we apply that foam at least 2.5 times as wide as the expected flame length. We also, so you want a nice thick wet line. You can apply it to the trees and the brush that are around just to make sure we don't get any spotting or popping that affects the brush nearby. Don't use a dry foam during mop-up. It will slow penetration into the hot fuels and won't reach the deep-seated heat. But if you want a hang time, so if you've done mop-up, then you can cover it with a drier foam, like I said earlier. Okay, lastly, when you're doing structure protection, you do want a really dry foam. And you add it to the exterior of the building. You want to loft the foam onto the walls. If you spray it like really hard against it, it bounces off. You want it to kind of land on it soft. So loft it onto the walls, the roof, under the eaves. And if the fire does get into the interior, you want to switch from calf back to a wetter foam. Remember, fire attack, lower percentage of foam, lower percentage of air. Protection or wet line, higher amount of air, higher amount of foam. So all of this will increase the cooling and penetrating actions if you make it a wetter foam. Okay, that's it. I hope that this was helpful for you and not confusing. Remember, foam concentrate plus water equals foam solution. Foam solution plus air equals foam, but foam can be in low, medium, or high expansion. I get my low expansion with a regular nozzle. I get my medium expansion with an air aspirating nozzle. I get my high expansion with calf. You can't get enough air in there with the nozzles, so you need a calf. Okay, that's it.